The veil had barely settled on her shoulders. Guests were still arriving. The violinist was halfway through the third verse of Canon in D. Candles flickered gently across the marble floor of St. Gabriel's Hall. The bride's bouquet was trembling in her hands, but not from nerves. Something was off. The groom was missing, and so was her mother. She excused herself, gracefully, still smiling, nodding to guests. "Just need a moment to breathe," she whispered. But what she found upstairs wasn't breath. It was betrayal, ferocious, visceral. Muffled voices through the locked chamber door. A knock. Then silence. Another knock. Louder. Still no answer. She twisted the handle. It was jammed. So she knocked one last time, hard, and that's when she heard it. Her mother's voice, low, gasping, and then the voice of her groom, laughter, skin against skin. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even open the door. She just turned, walked back down those polished stairs, past the altar she never made it to, past the white roses she'd chosen with her own mother just 3 days ago. And then she disappeared. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. The wedding guests waited. Whispers grew louder. The priest stood confused at the altar. But the bride never returned, not until 3 hours later. And when she did, she wasn't wearing the dress anymore. She wasn't smiling anymore. She walked into the reception, not the ceremony, with something in her hands. 2 envelopes, one labeled him, one labeled her, and a flash drive. She walked straight up to the DJ. No words exchanged, just a nod. And then the room went silent. The music stopped. And what played next would leave over 112 wedding guests frozen in place, half of them in tears. A few ran out. 2 women fainted. Because what she played, what she revealed, was something even she hadn't planned for. But before we continue, if your heart just dropped, or your fists clenched even a little, pause for 1 second. Tap the like button now. Hit subscribe, because stories like this aren't just told, they're felt, and drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? We watch the comments closely, especially those who feel a little too quiet when things get uncomfortable. Now, let's rewind. Who was she? Who was he? And why? Did none of this happen by accident? Her name was Amara Lee. To most people in Willow Ridge, she was just the florist's daughter, soft-spoken, almost shy. She worked part-time at a bookstore just off Rosemont Avenue and spent her evenings painting with oils and walking her dog along the lake. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, she didn't even post much on social media. But ask anyone who knew her closely, and they'll tell you, she loved deeply, trusted fully, and believed that family was everything. She was the kind of girl who packed her fiancé's lunch every morning, even though he worked 2 towns away, the kind who left notes on the bathroom mirror in lipstick, the kind who once spent 3 months secretly saving up for her mother's dream trip to Santorini. To the outside world, Amara had it all: a picture-perfect engagement, a loving mother, a soon-to-be husband who seemed charming, if a bit too polished, and a wedding that was set to be the most beautiful Willow Ridge had ever seen. Guests were flying in from 6 different states. The venue was booked 2 years in advance. Even the mayor was invited. Everything was arranged. Everything was controlled. But maybe that was the first warning sign, because Amara wasn't controlling. Her mother was. And the groom? Well, no one really knew who he was. Not truly. His name was Jaden Coyle, an architect, or so he said. Handsome, confident, the kind of man who could charm his way into any room and convince even the most skeptical father that he was the real deal. But for all his charisma, there were gaps, little ones. He never introduced her to his co-workers. He avoided long talks about the past. And he had an odd relationship with Amara's mother, overly polite, overly familiar. At the time, it just felt like a healthy closeness. After all, who wouldn't want their fiancé to get along with their mom? But looking back, it was more than closeness. It was chemistry, unspoken, unsettling, and unseen by Amara until it was too late. It was Saturday, June 11th, a date Amara had circled on her calendar in gold ink for over a year. She woke up early. She prayed. She ate exactly half a grapefruit and nothing more. At 11:17 a.m. her makeup artist arrived. At 12:42 p.m. her dress was zipped. By 1:15 p.m. the bridesmaids were in position, the photographers were ready, and the violinist had begun tuning. Everything was perfect. Except Jaden hadn't arrived, and neither had her mother. The best man claimed he'd spoken to him an hour earlier, said Jaden was on his way, but his phone now went straight to voicemail. Still, no one panicked. Not yet. Amara checked the time again. 2:09 p.m. The ceremony was set to begin in 6 minutes. She stepped out of the dressing room, took one long breath near the hallway window, and told her maid of honor, "I'll be right back." What happened next was never caught on any camera. There are only Amara's words and the aftermath. She said she felt something in her gut, a pull, a sudden cold knowing. She walked upstairs, took the long hallway to the right wing of the manor, where the bridal suites were empty, except one, a locked door, a whisper, a moan. Her heartbeat slowed. The door was old, the handle delicate. It wouldn't turn, but the air coming from underneath was warm, humid, breathing. She placed her ear to the wood. Then came the laughter, low, familiar, his, then hers. That was when the switch happened, not in the hallway, not behind the door, but inside Amara. She stepped back, didn't say a word, didn't knock again, didn't cry. She walked back down those stairs, out the back entrance. No one noticed. The next 3 hours are still a mystery. Where she went, what she did, who she called, or whether she'd already been planning what came next. Because when she returned, nothing about her was the same. If someone did this to your sister, your best friend, would anyone stand up for her? Or would they let the shame bury her story? Subscribe, so stories like Amara's are never erased. And if you're one of those who's just here to watch but not to care, tell us why in the comments. We're watching. And don't forget, where are you watching from? Because someone always is. At exactly 5:17 p.m., the doors to the reception hall creaked open. The chatter stopped. The music fell silent. A waiter froze mid-step, holding a tray of champagne flutes. Because standing in the doorway was Amara. No veil, no smile, no bridesmaids. Her hair was no longer curled. Her dress was gone. She wore a deep navy blue pantsuit, the kind of color that didn't ask for attention. It demanded silence. In her right hand, a small black flash drive. In her left, 2 sealed envelopes, one labeled, "To my groom," the other, "Mother." She didn't walk like a bride anymore. She moved like a verdict. She crossed the room alone, heels tapping like a countdown on the marble floor. No words, no apologies, not even tears, just silence. When she reached the DJ booth, she handed him the flash drive. Didn't say a word, just looked him in the eyes and nodded once. He hesitated. She didn't blink. A few awkward coughs from the crowd. Someone near the back whispered, "Is that Amara?" Then the speakers crackled, and the screen above the wedding cake came to life. What followed wasn't a slideshow. It wasn't a tribute. It was a revelation. The footage began quietly. Hidden security camera footage, taken in her own house. Angle, the downstairs hallway. Date, 1 week before the wedding. There he was, Jaden, in her home. Only, he wasn't waiting for her. He was waiting for someone else. A second figure entered the frame, taller, older. Her walk familiar. Her mother. At first, the room gasped. Then, no one breathed. They didn't talk in whispers. They didn't resist. They kissed, fully, passionately, like 2 people who'd done this before. The footage kept going. Different day, same house, new camera angle. This time, it wasn't just a kiss. It was intimacy. It was routine. It was betrayal layered upon betrayal, undeniable, deliberate, rehearsed. Some guests turned away, others stared, unblinking. But Amara just stood by the cake table, still, like marble, like the bride she'd never get to be. And when the footage ended, when the final clip showed her mother leaving her bedroom the morning of the rehearsal dinner, wearing Jaden's shirt, she walked to the center of the room, slow, composed. She held up the 2 envelopes. "This one," she said, lifting the one labeled Mother, "is for the woman who raised me to believe love was sacred." She let it fall to the floor. "And this," she said, holding up the other, "is for the man who taught me exactly how love dies." She dropped the second, then she turned and walked away, past every stunned guest, past the shocked priest, past the table where her now ex-fiancé and her mother sat frozen. And she never looked back. Not once. If you had to face a room like that, would anyone believe you? Would anyone stand with you? This world forgets too quickly. Subscribe now, so we never forget women like Amara, or walk past stories like this pretending they don't matter. Still not subscribing? Fine. But tell us why in the comments. And yes, we still want to know, where are you watching this from? Because silence speaks, and we're listening. For 30 full seconds after Amara left, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the entire reception had been buried alive under the weight of what they'd just seen. The silence was shattered, not by Jaden, not by Amara's mother, but by an elderly aunt seated near the back. She stood up, shaking, and shouted, "You knew, didn't you?" Her eyes were locked on Amara's father. He didn't respond, didn't defend himself, just sat, hands trembling, staring at the door his daughter had walked through. Because here's the truth most people forget. Betrayal doesn't end with the act itself. It ripples. The footage didn't just expose an affair. It unearthed years of whispers. One cousin remembered seeing Jaden and Amara's mother in a car together at midnight last spring. A bridesmaid admitted she'd always found it strange how possessive her mom was over the wedding details, even over Jaden himself. But the real explosion happened the next day, Sunday morning, 7:04 a.m. That's when the footage leaked. Someone had recorded the entire thing from the reception screen on their phone and posted it. It spread like wildfire. By noon, it had over 3 million views. News stations picked it up. TikTok stitched it. Commentators called it the ultimate wedding revenge. But Amara, she was gone. No press, no interviews, no dramatic statements, just gone. She deactivated her Instagram, left her apartment, resigned from her job. Some said she left the country. Others claimed she'd checked into a retreat in Iceland. A few online sleuths swore she was spotted in Montreal, wearing a beige coat, feeding birds in a park. But none of it was confirmed. Her mother tried to release a statement. It was cold, sanitized. "She's hurt, I understand, but private matters should remain private." Private, as if it were a paper cut, not a knife wound. Jaden? He disappeared too. Resigned from his firm, deleted his socials. A neighbor claimed they saw him walking barefoot in the rain a few weeks later, mumbling to himself, carrying one of the envelopes. He hasn't been heard from since. The venue never took another booking under that family's name again. Guests who were there say it changed them. One called it a spiritual fracture. Another said, "It felt like we watched someone rise from the ashes right in front of us." But the strangest reaction came from Amara's childhood priest. He wasn't at the wedding. He'd declined the invitation months earlier, quietly. When asked why later, he only said, "I knew something wasn't right. That house had too many closed doors." Most people turn away when the story gets uncomfortable. But you're still here. That says something. Now do something. Subscribe, so stories like this don't vanish into silence. If you're one of the ones still watching, but still refusing to subscribe, go ahead, drop a comment, tell us why, and tell us where you're watching from. Because somewhere out there, so is Amara, and she's watching too. 2 weeks after the wedding, a stranger walked into a second-hand bookstore in a small town just outside Asheville. He wore a gray coat, said almost nothing, paid in cash, and left behind a wrapped package on the counter with a single note taped to it. To the one who still sees. The clerk, young, tired, underpaid, didn't open it immediately. She placed it in Lost and Found and forgot about it for days. But when she finally peeled back the wrapping, she found a leather-bound journal, worn edges, smelled like eucalyptus and something older. Inside the first page, one name was written, neatly, in black ink, Amara Lee. The entries weren't dramatic. They weren't filled with rage. They were calculated, precise, planned. She had been documenting things for over 7 months. Unusual interactions between Jaden and her mother, weird glances, phone calls answered in other rooms, clothes folded strangely in drawers, perfume scents on coats that weren't hers. But then it got darker. There were notes that didn't make sense, like the same scar, left hip, both of them. She lied about June 3rd, but so did he. There are pages missing from her old journal, 12 of them, torn, buried. He called her Amara once, and she smiled. And finally, the most cryptic entry of all. The first betrayal wasn't mine. It was theirs. I was born into it. That entry was dated 3 days before the wedding. Some believe Amara had known everything for months. Some believe she only suspected and went looking, but a handful of people believe something far worse. That what happened at the wedding wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even the climax. It was the echo of something buried generations deep. A curse, a pattern, a story passed down in whispers. See, there are family friends, older ones, who say they remember something odd from decades ago, that Amara's mother wasn't the first in her bloodline to do something like this, that another wedding in the same family, 40 years earlier, ended the exact same way, and that bride, she disappeared too. This isn't just about one wedding or one family. It's about how secrets rot beneath beautiful things. If you've made it this far, don't just watch the story. Become part of the ones who keep them alive. Subscribe, because forgetting is the real betrayal. And if you're still watching and haven't clicked, type one word in the comments, why, and tell us where you're watching from, because stories like this don't just end. They wait, and they find the right people. It wasn't until the video was uploaded online, slowed down, frame by frame, that someone noticed it. Not in the footage itself, not in the scandal, but in the final second, just before the screen went black. A single symbol, white, subtle, flickered in the bottom left corner, barely visible. A triangle, open at the top. Inside it, 2 mirrored birds, one upright, the other upside down. To the average viewer, it looked like a designer's watermark, some obscure branding. But a man named Daryl, a retired theology professor living in Connecticut, recognized it instantly. He paused the frame, enlarged it, traced it with his stylus, and uploaded his findings to a small online forum called the Bloodline Archive. His post was titled, "The Lee Family Curse, Proof It Was Passed Through the Women." According to Daryl, the symbol wasn't just a design, it was a sigil. Used by a forgotten offshoot of a 14th century heretical sect called Fratres Umbrae, the Brothers of the Shadow. They believed the soul could fracture through betrayal, that every time a sacred vow was broken in blood, a mark was left behind, not just on the betrayer, but on their children, and their children's children. They taught that certain families became infected, and the only way to purge the curse was through full, public unveiling of the betrayal, at the cost of the family's dignity. Sound familiar? In this belief system, exposure was purification, shame was medicine, silence was death. Daryl went further. He tracked down old church records, found a woman with the last name Lee, Margarita Lee, executed in 1612 for ritual defilement during a wedding procession. The accusation? Her heart had married a man she called father before her mouth could marry the one called Groom. The church burned her body, but the family name lingered, passed through centuries, quiet, hidden, until somehow it landed on the invitation cards of a wedding in modern-day Willow Ridge. And when Amara added that symbol to her footage, whether consciously or not, something ancient was echoed, an unveiling, a reckoning, a cleansing. Was it coincidence, or did Amara know exactly what she was doing? There's one more thing. A Redditor, claiming to be one of Amara's college friends, shared this private text, sent to her 1 week before the wedding. I've seen the pattern. It ends with me. If I'm quiet, it continues. If I speak, they lose everything. Either way, I was never meant to walk away in white. She didn't, and yet, she walked away more whole than any bride ever could. Some stories aren't meant for everyone. They wait for certain people, people like you. If this story has reached you, if something about it lingers just beneath your skin, it means you're part of it now. Subscribe, not for us, for the voices that were never allowed to finish their vows, still watching, but still refusing to click. Drop a comment, tell us why, and don't forget, tell us where in the world you're watching from, because if the pattern is real, it's passed through places too, and maybe you've seen it before. There is no official record of where Amara Lee went after the wedding. No legal name change, no travel documentation, no forwarding address. Just absence. But if you pay close enough attention, you'll find traces. A man in Lisbon swore she stayed at his grandmother's inn under the name Clara. He said she never unpacked her suitcase, stayed only 2 nights, spent her mornings by the sea, burning folded letters in a seashell bowl, one at a time. In New Zealand, a remote Airbnb host claimed a woman matching Amara's description asked specifically for a cabin with no mirrors, left no review, left behind a silver ring engraved with a bird upside down. There's a rumor she was seen in the back of a cathedral in Prague, kneeling in the shadows during midnight mass, wearing all black. She didn't take communion. She never looked up. But the parish priest said she whispered something as she left. It ends with me, but it doesn't stay with me. And then, nothing. Until one anonymous blog post surfaced on a dark corner of the web. No author name, no photos, just one headline. To the next bride who needs to know. It's short, barely 200 words, but its closing paragraph haunts anyone who reads it. You will think it's just betrayal. It's not. You will think you were fooled. You weren't. You were chosen. And when it finally breaks in front of everyone, breathe. That breath is the first one your family has taken in centuries. The post was deleted within 48 hours, but not before it was screenshotted, not before it made its way into digital archives, not before it reached women in over 32 countries, and not before someone added this comment at the bottom: Amara lives, but she doesn't answer to that name anymore. So, what really happened on Amara Lee's wedding day? Was it betrayal? Vengeance? A woman's final stand? Or was it the breaking of something much older, something stitched into her bloodline before she was even born? You've heard the story. You've followed every echo. Now ask yourself, was she running away? Or was she freeing herself from something you can't even name yet? Comment your theory below, and more importantly, if you've made it this far and you still haven't subscribed, that says more about you than it does about us. You're already here. Tap the red button. Join those who remember. Stand with the ones who walk away from silence. And if you won't, go to the comments. Type exactly why. Don't hold back. And as always, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Because we'll be reading, and so will others, and maybe, just maybe, whatever followed Amara out of that house isn't done watching yet.